the West and the East. The West and Russia are fighting over Bosnia and Herzegovina at the moment. Why we have that fight here today in Bosnia?
This beautiful country with its mountain and its rivers and its sense of humor and its joie de vivre, but also cursed in the way it is, will always be picked over by what you call the East and the West. I mean, if we look at it now, one can fear the idea of sort of Moscow and Istanbul picking over the bones, with the European Union trying to sort of, hello, we're still here, or we're trying to be. Clearly a rather better option, I would imagine. But it's a shame. I mean, that which makes Sarajevo so wonderful and interesting, with its kind of blur between the Habsburg and the Ottoman, that which makes the culture of this place so intellectually Western and Eastern and Southern, Mediterranean in a strange way. You pay a price for that, and those are the fault lines that cut beneath this place, and it's very poignant that this Bosnian edition of the book, which is going to have a very different life to the English edition, I suspect, comes out on the week of the 25th anniversary of the first shot fired in this city that ignited the nightmare that we're going to talk about. That it comes out on the day that the British Foreign Secretary is here, Boris Johnson, whose predecessors played such a shameful role in rewarding and appeasing the genocide in this country.
Does Britain still play that role in Bosnia?
Well, we'll see what Britain's role in Bosnia is, but I mean, it's changed, hasn't it? I mean, it's a good question, because the toxic, poison political developments which are corroding Europe again now, led by Boris Johnson, Theresa May, Marine Le Pen, is all about the politics of division, exclusion, installing fear into the other, getting rid of the other, as opposed to being like I am. I enjoy having my coffee served made by Portuguese people, pizza made by Italians, beer pulled by a Polish person. What's the problem, for Christ's sake? So in a way, Boris Johnson's in the right place, because the insidious politics that he, May and Le Pen are now preaching in Europe began here in their modern form 25 years ago in Sarajevo. So this isn't so much a question of East and West. It's a question of the two kinds of human beings that exist on this planet. The ones who quite like having everybody else around, and the ones who just want to be with their own. I mean, when I first came to Yugoslavia, and Edin and Dragan and Davor were watching a football match, you didn't sit around wondering who was Serb, Croat and Muslim. You just watched the bloody football match. But now Boris Johnson and co are bringing all that politics back again. And that was the fault line in this country. And in a way, yes, as you say, it's East-West. But it's not just East-West, it's the other. Do people want to live in peace with the other and learn a little bit and try to speak some languages and just enjoy each other's company? Or do we all want to just crawl away into a horrible little toilet of just our own people and nobody else? And that was the problem that ignited the ghastly violence in this country.
Putin is trying.
And there is a connection.
Yep.
There is a direct connection between Brexit, Marine Le Pen, and what started here in Sarajevo 25 years ago.
And Vladimir Putin, who's a friend of Marine Le Pen, is trying to influence the Balkans here through his contacts with Milorad Dodik and Aleksandar Vučić and Tomislav Nikolic. Should we fear here in Bosnia of that connection?
Absolutely, and that's my point exactly. You know, I mean, it's not a question of, and Putin is East and Le Pen is West and Johnson and May are West. So it's not East-West. It's what I say. It's the great divide, the fault line, which is irreconcilable, is between the people who like having, as I say, the coffee made by the Portuguese and the pizza made by the Italians, or like watching football with my friends, whether they're Serb, Croat, Martian or Finnish, don't care, because they're nice people to have around, and the people who don't, the people who just want to live in a little sewer of boring, all the same, my narod, that awful word, Britanski narod, Brexit, Srpski narod, or blah, 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 blah. It's a, you know, it's visceral. And they all talk about it, whether they're Dodik or Johnson or May or Le Pen or Karadzic or Mladic, they all, always Begovic, they talk about it as politics. It's not politics. It's visceral. It's in there. It's in every membrane. Are you one of those kind of people? Or one of these kind of people?
Recently we had...
and the difference ultimately is between peace and war.
Yes. Recently we had really big story here in Bosnia. It was revision of ICG verdict from 2007, and that revision process on a genocide against Serbia was refused by ICG. Do you think that that was done by just a political means and ways, or it was move against the victims of this war?
What, in The Hague?
Yes.
Bosnia-Herzegovina
against versus
Serbia in the genocide.
Yes.
In the nation to nation, not the ICTY. Well, I mean, I don't know is the answer. And if I had one, I'd offer one. But I mean, it seems to me that, you know, long ago, for all the best efforts of the ICTY, and there have been some successes, not all of them judicial, if anything has been achieved by that court. I think it's probably just been the accumulation of testimony in the witness box for history's sake, rather than anything judicial. But yeah, I mean, the thing of the ICJ is, you know, I think the powers, the greater powers that be, have decided that Bosnia-Herzegovina cannot and will not win this case. I mean, justice is disposable if the money is not there. And I know this isn't a question of money like cash, but it's a question of sort of political currency, if you like, and it's, you know, as the British Foreign Office might say, you know, it's just a bit too inconvenient, old boy. You know, not very useful is the word they like in diplomacy, isn't it? Is it useful or not? Well, it's not very useful. But I don't know exactly why it happened. But from the very beginning, the ICTY decided to conceal various documents from the Bosnian government in the case with regard to Serbian role in Serbia proper's role in Srebrenica. Florence Hartman was jailed merely for revealing the fact that this had happened. So I think we're all sort of, I mean, if there's one thing I'm happy about this edition of the book, among the many other reasons that it's going to have, I hope, a different life than the English edition, is it enables me 5 years later to rectify some of the more polite things I was saying about The Hague. They were true at the time, but I think we have to look back rather more sort of sadly at the history of the ICTY and your point about the ICJ. I mean, it's becoming a bit of a farce on all levels, isn't it? I don't think, you know, they're very good at sort of African warlords and at the criminal court and nautical disputes in the ICJ. But I mean, it's put it this way: you know, we pay a lot of money, us taxpayers, for diplomats, judges, limousines, canapes, embassies. You know, we often stop to think how much we pay for all this. I mean, all their little cocktail parties, they're quite expensive, these things, and they're not paying, we are. But when it comes to a crisis, a real crisis, Bosnia and Rwanda and Ukraine and now Syria, do they have an answer? No. I mean, they're clueless, they're useless, they don't know what to do. And I think your point about the ICJ is probably part of that. It's a big problem. So the best thing to do with all our canapes, limousines, embassies, cocktail parties, and what do they call them now? Team building breaks at taxpayers' expense is all part of that. They're no good. I mean, if you were a plumber or a carpenter or an auto mechanic working to those standards, you'd lose your job pretty quickly.
Indeed. You have just mentioned Steve I, and you have been a 9-time witness in front of that judicial institution, if we can call it like that. But the three most important cases at this moment are Karadzic, Mladic, and Šestorka. What we can expect from those cases, and what impact they will have on Bosnia?
Well, it's a crucial point, because in those calculations lies the whole efficacy of every minute of effort that others and I have put into this. Every brave person who came forward to give their testimony from the diaspora and from Bosnia, to put their story on the record, if you like, for judicial reasons, admittedly. It all basically hangs on this now. There have been some successes. I mean, it's better that Milan Lukic is in jail than not in jail, even if it's a 5-star jail where he can watch pornographic videos and play tennis with his adversaries or whatever he does. I mean, I would rather they were in jail in kind of Iran or Alabama, to be honest, where a jail is a jail. But look, with Karadzic, well, as you say, we don't know about the others yet, but let's start with Karadzic. When that sentence came down, Human Rights Watch said, at last the victims have their reckoning, blah, blah, justice is done, etc. As you say, genocide in Srebrenica, with respect to everyone who was bereaved by or survived Srebrenica. Good, thank you, phew. But we knew that already from other cases. Genocide, no. Predo, no. Vlasenica, no. Bielinja, no. Foča, no. Visegrad, no. All the other places. The list is endless. Your viewers know it well. Now, what does that say? Well, it basically says that whatever they did in Priedo, for instance, i.e. burn every house to the ground, herd the men into concentration camps, herd the rest over the mountains, Mountain Vlasic, incinerate every school, mosque, library, Catholic church, whatever, rape, torture, mutilate, murder, but not genocide. Oh, really? So, well, I'm not a lawyer, thank God, but I mean, what is in that case? I mean, if what they did in Foča and Visegrad and Vlasenica and all these other places is not genocide, then what is? So I guess the message is, well, the message is in the narrative of what's happened since. I mean, one of the tropes from the ICTY was, we are now established and the tyrants and killers of the future will think again. They know we are here. They will have to face justice. Well, ISIS and Bashar Assad don't seem so far to be particularly intimidated.
In your book, you're writing about lives of those who have survived concentration camps. And let me put this question like this to you. Srebrenica, Omarska, Trnopolje, Tomašica, Dretelj.
Well, Tomašica is a huge important point with this book because it was found since.
But what all those names mean for you as a journalist, as a reporter, as a human being, 25 years since they have happened?
As a journalist, I've lost track of what they mean, those names, those words, and everything they mean, because I've sort of run out of words now. I mean, as Samuel Beckett, our great poet, said, "What shall we do when even words fail?" And from now on, I couldn't write any more journalism on any of these places. I gave it my last shot last year, writing in praise of the International Commission on Missing Persons and in despair that they have to keep working like they do. And an exploration of this theme that wasn't sufficiently in the English edition is, I hope, here, this awful word, missing, which you can add to the list, because that's the worst word of all in any war, really. Missing. And what do those words mean? I mean, as a human being, I don't know what they mean. I mean, complete exhaustion with it all. I mean, it's so huge. I mean, you've named, in your short list of words, you've named the massacre of 8,000 men and boys in 5 days, followed by the burial, disinterment, reburial, disinterment and reburial of those remains of those people, so that the highways and byways of eastern Bosnia, and there aren't many roads in eastern Bosnia, were heaving with body parts to hide the evidence, and nobody said a thing. When you say Tomašice, you're talking about the remains being exhumed decades later, having been concealed and hidden by those who did it, and those who knew, and those who lived in the villages along the route, all of them, not just the commanders, all of them, of people whose families I know, who live in St. Louis, Missouri, or Watford, near London, or Copenhagen, or Hamburg, or Munich. You know, Omarska, I mean, it's become my middle name. I'm not sure, I think I rather regret it, to be honest, if I hadn't made so many friends from this tragedy. You know, thank you, because one doesn't get to discuss philosophy on television very often. But you know, I have conversations with religious people who I envy. I wish I was religious. I'd love to believe that the light of God is in every human being, but I don't. And I'd love to be a humanist, as I was when I was a teenager, exploring the Italian Renaissance. Man is the measure of all things. How wonderful. But I don't think, I think man is kind as a effing nightmare. However, I grew up in the 60s, you know, peace and hope die hard, you know, we're kind of, my generation's hardwired to stick to something that came out of those years. I saw a Jefferson Starship concert a few years ago, and the bass player, Freeberg, came forward and just said, "Why can't we all just get along?" And it's, you could say that's just an old hippie, you know, blathering away, but actually it's a pretty good question, actually, and it deserves a good answer from one of these people. I mean, you know, perhaps Messrs. Dodik, is it Begovic, Khadizeh, I've lost track of the Khadizeh, Johnson, May, Le Pen, maybe they'd like to, you know, be asked that question, because it's quite a good one. Why not? And, you know, I've never thought of myself as a war correspondent. I think of myself as an anti-war correspondent, you know, as a peace correspondent. I've been working in Colombia recently because there's a peace process there, and I'm now much more interested in peace processes than I am in war, and why some of them work and why they don't. And, you know, why didn't this one work? Well, because it wasn't really a peace process. It was just a freeze frame. But Dayton, it was they just pressed the pause button on the war. They put the guns away, but the reasons for the war never went away. There was no attempt to dismantle them. What they're doing in Colombia is they're using the peace with FARC to actually rearrange the society and the curses of land accumulation and narco traffic, which have been causing this war since 1948. Here in Bosnia, I'm afraid to say, that wasn't done. In Colombia, there is a mass movement for peace. I mean, when President Santos lost the plebiscite for his peace process, hundreds of thousands, millions of young people occupied every street in every square in Colombia, in every city and every town, saying, no, we're not going back to war. And that's what needs to happen here. You know, it needs the generation of, you know, my children, the camp survivors, the massacre survivors' children, to say, ya basta, as they say in Spanish, enough. You know, we've got things to worry about, like climate change, our economic future. You know, I don't care whether you're a Serb, a Croat, or a Martian. You know, let's get on with it.
And we know that Senad have said in April of 1992 that the war started, and he never said that the war is ended here. Can we still speak about that war, but now led through politicians and journalists who are exactly that, not neutral and not objective?
I think objectivity is crucial. I don't think that we can't I was attacked for testifying at The Hague for losing my objectivity and neutrality. I never lost my objectivity. Objectivity is fact specific. You know, if there's 12 people dead in a house that you find in central Bosnia, that's 12 people. You know, it's not 8 because they're Croats or 18 because they're Serbs or Bosniak. Or it's 12 people, and they are who they are. And that's, you write it down, and you don't. Now, but neutrality is something else. There are moral implications in the word neutrality, and you know, you can't have on the one hand, on the other. You can't have sort of. You know, I'm not neutral between a raped woman and the people who rape her in the camp. You know, I'm not neutral between the torturer, and the tortured. You know, I'm not, and that's not just Bosnia. I'm not neutral between kids who go to the Bataclan theatre in Paris and guys who come in and kill them. I mean, I'm not neutral, but it's not on the one hand, on the other. So let's establish that, and that's why I went to The Hague. But you also introduced this idea of political non-neutrality, of didactic political journalism on behalf of one party or another. That's different. That's parti pris. You know, I'm not parti pris. I mean, I'm as happy, or not as happy. I'm as sad, but able, but willing to criticize the abuse of Judaism by Israel as I am the abuse of Christianity by the Serbs and Croats in this country, and now the abuse of Islam by the Islamists. You know, I mean, they're all trying to use beautiful scriptures to repulsive ends, which are political. You know, when I see the cross up on the top of Kozara Kamen near Prijedor, you know, I don't see a sign of peace. I see a terrible sign of domination and persecution. And, you know, so that's, you know, that's the kind of, you're introducing another kind of neutrality of using religion, propaganda. Obviously, I'm opposed to that. I mean, you know, I would never work for a party newspaper.
Why people like you, like Florence Hartman, like many others, are coming and fighting for this country, for its people, and our intellectuals, our people with their own thoughts are silent and they're not speaking? What forces you and the people like you to come here and fight for this country and for the better future for new generations here?
Perhaps we're just crazy. You know, perhaps we should just get a life and go somewhere else. I mean, I go to Omarska every August. I should probably go to Sardinia and read a book on the beach. God, I have no idea why. No, I do. Look, I know Americans who cut their teeth in El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras during the dirty wars that Reagan was fighting, when the death squads were wiping out indigenous people in those countries, or they were in Chile during the coup. And they always go back, they have to go back. They were shaped by this. It was their formative experience, this. And in their case, it was interesting because it made them dissident to their being in the United States. And Bosnia was the same for us as Europeans. I mean, you know, we were just on the crest of the wave. The Berlin Wall had come down, Romania, then Poland, then Czechoslovakia, and we were uniting this continent. At last, Spain and Portugal had come in from fascism during my time. People forget that. And Europe was becoming Europe. And then suddenly, this car crash, it crashes into this horrific bloodbath, first in Croatia and then here. And so that affected me as a European, to go back to the beginning, which is why I find what, you know, Johnson and May and Le Pen are doing so repulsive. You know, as a European, Bosnia really affected us because this was happening in our continent. I've always thought of myself as a European, not British, and or British and European. You know, it was visceral, and also we learned a lot. I mean, good and bad, about survival, about humour, black humour, hollow humour, about resourcefulness, about dignity, I was always very moved during the siege in Sarajevo that the second largest product on the black market after cigarettes was cosmetics, because women, middle-aged women, young women, wanted to look their best when they went out to queue for water, risking a sniper's bullet, often never to come back, having taken a sniper's bullet. You got to know about humour, and above all, and I think also we are writers as well, and the reason why this book is so, books have a life you don't intend. And the English version was I want to tell the world what happened in Europe. You don't know this, or you've forgotten it, or you never noticed, but I think you should know. I have to tell you, the book was a total failure. I mean, not many people want to know what happened in Bosnia, to be honest. You can buy a very large number of remaindered copies going for 1 pence of this book in English. But this edition has a completely different life, because it's not telling you anything you don't already know. So why I think this, why I'm back again, to answer your question, to do this, is because, okay, so in that book, very brave women talk about, for instance, the violation in Omarska. Now, it's 2 or 3 women in Omarska. But there are a lot of people out there in Foča and Vogosha and Visegrad, Vilna Vlas, who, although it's not their story, they recognize it. And even when young Edin Ramulic, my friend, describes as a young boy seeing his father taken away and being humiliated by the troops, laughing and being forced to sing Chetnik songs, and he never sees his father again. Well, that's Edin telling his story. But in Vlasenica and Bielinja and Rogatica, there are a lot of people who will think, God, I remember something similar like that. So in a way, this book has a very different adventure in your language than it does in mine, because it's telling it. It's there. I think the answer to your question is because we could not leave this unsaid. And so long as the politicians and the diplomats and this farce, this money laundering system called the international community continues to obfuscate, to use its own inhuman language to describe what happened, then we have to counter it with what we talk about in the bar, with people who are often crying into their rakia or just watching football. I mean, we have to just tell the people's story.